The airport was unusually loud that morning, the kind of noise that felt layered, rolling suitcases scraping across polished floors, overhead announcements echoing in metallic waves. Hurried footsteps blending with the low hum of jet engines outside the glass walls. People moved with purpose. Expensive perfume floated through the air. Laptops were tucked under tailored arms. Luxury handbags rested on shoulders that had never worried about overdraft fees. And near Gate 32, seated quietly between a charging station and a tall window overlooking the runway, sat a woman most people didn't notice. Amara Cole kept her posture relaxed, her worn leather handbag resting gently in her lap. She wore simple dark jeans, a plain white blouse, and flat black shoes. No flashy jewelry, no designer labels. Her natural curls framed her face softly, and her expression carried a calm that didn't beg for attention. But attention found her anyway. When first-class boarding was announced, she stood and stepped into the priority line. That was when the shift happened. It was subtle at first, a pause in conversation, a raised eyebrow, a glance that lingered too long. The flight attendant scanning boarding passes offered polished smiles to the passengers ahead of her. But when Amara handed over her ticket, that smile thinned. "Ma'am," the attendant said carefully, glancing at her clothes before looking at the screen, "this is the first-class boarding line." Amara nodded gently. "Yes, I know." The attendant studied the boarding pass longer than necessary. Her fingers tapped the device. Her eyes scanned Amara from head to toe once more. "I'm going to need to verify something," she said. Behind Amara, a man in a navy suit shifted impatiently. "Is there a problem?" he asked loudly, not hiding his irritation. The attendant forced a professional tone. "Just a moment." Whispers began to stir. They weren't loud, but they were sharp enough to cut, probably in the wrong line. Maybe she upgraded by mistake. "She doesn't look like first class." Amara had heard variations of those words her entire life. They no longer shocked her. What still surprised her was how comfortable people felt saying them out loud. A gate supervisor was called over. The supervisor didn't greet Amara with a smile. She crossed her arms instead. "There seems to be an issue with your ticket," the supervisor said. "What issue?" Amara asked calmly. "It may not be valid for this cabin." "I purchased it directly through the airline," Amara replied. "Yes, but sometimes there are system errors." The man behind her chuckled under his breath. "Yeah, system errors." The supervisor leaned slightly closer. "We're going to need you to step aside while we sort this out." Amara stepped aside without protest. The whispers followed her like shadows. She could feel eyes measuring her, calculating her worth by fabric and footwear. Security approached a few minutes later. That was when the situation stopped being uncomfortable and started becoming humiliating. "Ma'am," one of the officers said, "we're going to have to ask you to leave the boarding area until this is resolved." "On what grounds?" she asked quietly. "There's a discrepancy with your payment method." "I paid with a corporate account," she said. The suited man behind her laughed openly this time. "Corporate account, sure." The supervisor's tone hardened. "If you don't comply, we'll have to escort you out." For a brief second, something flickered behind Amara's calm expression. Not fear, not panic, decision. She reached into her handbag slowly. Security tensed, watching carefully. Instead of pulling out documents or arguing further, she removed her phone. She dialed a number from memory. "Good morning, Daniel," she said when the line connected. The supervisor frowned. "Who are you calling?" Amara didn't answer her. "I'm at gate 32, she continued softly into the phone. "Could you come here for a moment?" A pause, then a change in tone from the other side. "I'll be there immediately," the voice replied. The call ended. The man in the navy suit shook his head. "This is unbelievable." 3 minutes later, the atmosphere shifted before anyone fully understood why. Two senior executives walked briskly toward the gate, their expressions tense. Behind them was Daniel Reeves, the airline's CEO, adjusting his tie as he approached. He stopped the moment he saw her, his face drained of color. "Ms. Cole," he said, his voice suddenly formal. The supervisor blinked. "You know her?" Daniel looked at her as if the question had insulted physics itself. "Know her?" he repeated quietly. He turned to the supervisor. "This is Amara Cole." There was a pause. No one reacted yet. "She is the majority owner of this airline." Silence doesn't usually have weight, but in that moment it did. It pressed against every person standing there. The suited man's mouth slowly closed. The supervisor's arms dropped to her sides. Security stepped back as if distance could undo what had already happened. Amara didn't smile, she didn't gloat. She didn't raise her voice. "You said there was a discrepancy," she reminded the supervisor gently. The woman's lips trembled. I thought." "Yes," Amara said softly, "you thought." Daniel looked mortified. Ms. Cole, I had no idea you were flying today. That was intentional, she replied. Her gaze swept across the small crowd that had formed. I wanted to see something for myself. No one spoke. When I was 16, she continued evenly, I worked nights cleaning airport terminals. I remember watching passengers walk past me as if I didn't exist. I remember promising myself that if I ever had power in a place like this, I would use it to make sure no one else felt that small. She turned back to the supervisor. Today, I felt it again. The words weren't loud, but they landed heavily. Daniel cleared his throat. Let's move this conversation somewhere private. 2 hours later, an emergency board meeting was underway. Executives sat stiffly around a polished table, their earlier confidence replaced with discomfort. Security footage from the gate played on a large screen. There was Amara standing calmly while being questioned. There were the whispers, the laughter. What policy did I violate? She asked quietly, no one answered. What procedure required my removal? Silence stretched. I built this company with the belief that access should not be determined by perception, she continued. But perception nearly removed me from my own aircraft. The supervisor sat at the far end of the table, eyes red. I'm deeply sorry, she said. I believe you are, Amara replied. But this isn't about personal guilt, it's about systemic reflex. She outlined immediate reforms, independent audits of passenger complaints, mandatory bias retraining, mystery traveler evaluations, clear documentation before any passenger removal. Accountability, she said, is not revenge, it is correction. By evening, someone had leaked the story. Headlines exploded across social media. The narrative was dramatic. Airline owner removed from first class for looking poor. But when reporters requested interviews, Amara agreed to only one press conference. Standing at a podium the next day, still dressed simply, she addressed the cameras. I was not humiliated, she said calmly. I was informed. Informed of what? A reporter asked. That we still have work to do. Are you angry? No. Disappointed? Yes. Will anyone be fired? Change is not built on public punishment, she replied. It is built on internal transformation. A month later, Gate 32 looked different. New signage emphasized respect and inclusion. Staff interactions felt warmer, more intentional. Complaint reports had decreased significantly. The same supervisor stood behind the desk one afternoon when a woman in worn sneakers approached the first-class line. For a brief second, old instincts flickered across her face. Then she smiled warmly. Welcome, ma'am. May I see your boarding pass? No hesitation, no scanning judgment, just service. From across the terminal, Amara watched quietly. Daniel stood beside her. You changed the culture, he said. She shook her head slightly. No, they chose to. He glanced at her outfit. You could dress like an owner, you know. A faint smile touched her lips. I already do. When first-class boarding was called again that day, she stepped into line. This time there were no whispers, no raised eyebrows, just a simple scan of her ticket and a polite nod. As she walked down the jet bridge, sunlight poured through the tall windows, casting a golden glow across the floor. People still judged by appearances every day. The world had not magically transformed, but inside these walls something had shifted. And sometimes that is how change begins. Not with shouting, not with revenge, but with quiet truth standing its ground until the system has no choice but to see it.